Welcome to the show, a joint venture here, Lamestream Sports, and if you're watching on YouTube, a football show. That is Zach Lyons joining us here. Zach, great to have you on the program. We do appreciate it on Lamestream Sports. Of course, if you're listening on the podcast, brought to you by Eighth and Roast. But again, if you'd like to watch the interview, please go check us out on YouTube. Zach, how are you, sir? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. I am on a hater's high right now. So you know how people have a runner's high? I'm on a hater's high because Kendrick Lamar showed it the whole world last night that hate, we're just not using our hate correctly. And hate is not a bad thing. He decimated Drake. That might as well have been Drake's funeral. Like if this was an election, Drake's campaign would have to tell him that they lost California.
Wow.
So here's the thing.
Wow.
This is how like I saw a video clip this morning. We are recording this at like 8:38 a.m. I saw a video clip this morning. I'm assuming that is what you are referring to, but I'm not sure. I know he was singing his like the song that like ended the beef, but like I didn't even know what I was looking at.
So it was a whole concert for his pop out concert on Amazon. So he started with Euphoria, comes out from the stage, starts with Euphoria, everybody singing, and he goes through this whole set list. Then he ends it with doing the Not Like Us 6 times. Now 5 times vocally, 1 time instrumentally in a row. Everybody stays. Everybody is singing. Then he just starts bringing up celebrities on stage. DeMar Rosen was out there, and Russell Westbrook was out there. Then everybody that performed was out there. I mean, just bringing people up. LeBron James was in the in the stadium. But it's a real tribute to those of us who just enjoy hating on other people. Game respects game. So I have to say that I already was a Kendrick Lamar fan and anti-Drake, but man, that was hate on another level. And the cinematography, I know this is Lamestream Sports, so let's talk about the actual production of the show. It deserves Oscars. There was a part where he does the bop, bop, bop. And like the camera is just changing angles like it's an anime. Yeah. Like it was insane production. Bravo. It trumps everything the Super Bowl has ever tried to do. Like it was amazing from production standpoint.
What was number 1 on your hate list before this?
As far as like who do I hate or
who did the hate? Who did the hate best?
Yeah, who did it? Who did it so well that you were just like
Skip Bayless?
You would just revel in it. You would just feel the hate come over you.
I'm a big roast guy, and maybe that hate is not where that comes from, but this Adam Ray and Tony Hinchcliffe. I don't know if Tony Hinchcliffe did the roast of Tom Brady. And Adam Ray is the comedian that dresses up like Dr. Phil and does comedy, like really vulgar comedy in a Dr. Phil impression. And like when he says something really untowards, he will be like, let's go to break. And, like it's really fun. Those guys hate on a different level than everybody else. So like comedians tend to be the best haters. So that's, the sarcastic roasts and all that kind of stuff was usually where I tend to lean.
I would throw my personal vote in for Anthony Jeselnik just because I think he's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I saw him at the Ryman last year, absolutely crushed. And again, the one rule, and we'll eventually talk about who you are, Zach, and your career and all this other stuff in sports media. But the one thing, the rule is not to be, you can be offensive as you want to be. The key is to be entertaining and funny. If the rule is if you're not funny, then the joke's no good. That's when we start talking about removing the joke. All right. So speaking of the hate, and part of the reason I am, host of Football and Other F Words, author of and originator of stackingtheinbox.com. And this week we'll talk about what you got to do on 104.5 The Zone, but ultimately, honored to call you my co-host on a football show, and been working together with you for a couple of years now. And I think one of the reasons your work has resonated and the reason I wanted to work with you is, even though I disagree all the time with you, you are always authentic, always yourself. And I never have to worry about you bringing something fake to the table. And sometimes that creates hate, whether it's Twitter hate, whether it's comments hate, whether it's whatever it might be, and I'm assuming that just that comes from a place of where you started, which was just I'm just with my buddies and having a good time talking about something we love. So explain the start with this whole journey you've been on.
The start of where I've really found my authentic voice just growing up. Like I'm big into comedy, so like George Carlin, Dana Carvey, and even Eddie Murphy, those specials really resonated with me, even though I was probably too young to really be watching them. But comedy specials were a big thing for me growing up. So I always enjoyed, even when Comedy Central was first starting out, they would have even these big names that now doing showing their stand-up specials, because that's what Comedy Central started out at. So HBO specials, all that kind of stuff. So I've always been a blunt person, and I think I get that from our family in general. Our family in general are just blunt people, but we're always honest and true to each other. And so I think that is the biggest thing, is that I know who I am, so I'm comfortable in my own skin from a personality standpoint and everything like that. Like, I know who I am. So when we started doing this, when you're a bunch of guys getting together, right, you always are ribbing each other. There's a few sensitive people. There's always that one sensitive guy in the group, but you're always ribbing each other, and everybody's having a good time, and nobody takes it too personally. And I always thought that, like, it would benefit to have a drunk stream, like on a drunk broadcast for football or sports in general, where it's just two guys who just really love the team or really love the sport, and are just analyzing the game and talking about the game, talking about their team, and just unfiltered, whatever, just their honest opinions, and they're having a good time. I think they would always do numbers. And so when we started doing our fantasy football league, and listen, this is how serious this fantasy football league is. Shout out to the TPL. But we have bylaws, because we get together. We have summer meetings, summer ownership meetings. We get together, we drink, we vote on new rules, we change rules up and all this kind of stuff. And, we have bylaws. And so me and Michael Gillum, Mr. Lebowski, we were like, let's get together, because he lived really close to me. Let's get together and let's just record on my back porch, drinking some whiskey, and talk about that week of fantasy football from the league perspective. Like, we are the ESPN of the TPL Fantasy Football League. And the 12 people that we made it for. And
what does TPL stand for?
Tennessee Penal League. That has been the name before I joined. I joined way late. This is in the game. So I think I've been in there since 2017 in that league. But it was been around for a while. So I don't know where the TPL name technically originated, but that is what it's called. And and significant others and a couple of the guys are like, y'all should do this, for the Titans. And so we started getting drunk in my room, in our office down there. We moved it out to the garage at some point, and we were just four guys drinking. We talked Titans for one episode, NFL for the next episode, and we released those later. I mean, we record those back to back, so we were hammered by the time that we got done with the second episode. We have an infamous AFC West, around the AFC West episode, that is nowhere to be found, because we were probably 6 bottles of wine deep, slurring our words, not being able to put together coherent sentences. I dropped Huxley on his head on the table at some point, and you can hear just like this loud crash. So it was a
Steve, that is his.
For those that may not know, Huxley is a French bulldog, and we just got him.
I was going to say, my son Huxley.
Yeah, pretty much. He's still my son Huxley, or he could be my BFF, my bro. But and so it kind of progressed over the years into now this thing that we have to stay sober for, because it actually started catching on and being professional and for some reason well respected in local media circles. So it's a surreal thing. When you talk about fantasy league specific podcasts, now to one of the best, I think, Titans podcasts out there, just in football and other efforts in general.
I was going to say, that's the Football and Other Efforts origin story. So quickly, I want you to try to describe in your own words from that like, I dropped my dog on his head, we drank too much wine episode, through to working with me and you and I sort of doing something a little bit more, I don't want to say like toned down, but like it's still kind of, we want to be ourselves and be authentic, but it's certainly more toned down than that, to then going on to 104.5. Explain how different you have to be through that journey and through all those different mediums.
I don't really think I have to be that different. I think the biggest difference is the amount of cussing I do on every show. Because people even on the 104.5 YouTube chat on Tuesday were like, really proud of Zach. This is a win for Zach no matter what happens because he didn't cuss once. The worst word I said was hell. So, I did pretty good. And I even went on to like a mini little fun rant. And, sometimes those could be those tirades could be laced with profanity. So for me, I don't think it has to be that different. And this is something that I was kind of talking about in my phone interview for this audition. And was that like when I started cussing when I was in probably second grade. I don't think my parents know this. So I was cussing second grade, F-bombs included. So then in sixth grade, we transferred to a Christian school. I go to a private school. And that's where I spent, 1990, part of 1996 to 2002. So I'm in part of the church and in a youth group and all this stuff. So I'm able to flip that switch fairly easily. So for me, as long as I'm just true to myself, I think the biggest thing was scripts. Was the biggest change is that like I wrote my intro, my outro scripts for the radio. I had my time, I had to go to break at a certain time, make sure that we get to break at a certain time. In podcasts are no breaks. So that to me is probably the biggest transition. But as far as for my personality or my energy or anything, I think that pretty much translates just a different level of, I go from R to PG-13 to PG.
Yep.
Do you know if they had you on a delay?
I think I heard someone say they were on a 30-second delay. For me, they definitely should have had me on a delay just in case. But like I said, I am pretty cognizant of my surroundings and all that kind of stuff when it comes to cussing. Even around kids, I know which cuss words I can get away with around certain kids and certain parents and stuff. So, I'm pretty good at it. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm pretty damn good at it.
Every just for the record, every radio station runs on a delay so that the dump button can be used. So
I got to ask, which school did you go to?
In Florence or like in Alabama when I was growing up?
Yeah. Oh, so it was in Florence. It wasn't here.
Yeah, no, it was in Florence, Alabama. So I went to Shoals Christian School. It started off like a non-denominational only school. So I go from a county school with like probably like 100 kids in my class, like 9. And it was like 3 guys and 6 girls. And I was one of the 3 guys. And then really good ratio, by the way, for guys and girls, the guy to girl ratio there. And then that following year, they then merge this non-denominational school merges with one of the bigger Baptist schools, and they formed this like mega private school called Shoals Christian School. So I've had a lot of training, making new friends. So, you go from one school into another school, then that school merges with another one. And then in my senior year of high school, right before we started that, we moved up to Columbia, Tennessee, and I went to a public school. I was like, I'm done with private schools. And then go to University of Memphis after that. So like from 6th grade to freshman year of college, I have transitioned to like 5 different, schools pretty much.
Well, what most people don't understand about going to Christian schools, and I went to a Church of Christ high school here in town. There's no less cussing. There's no less of most of anything. It's just that you're always looking around for an adult and to make sure that nobody says anything sort of like in front of anyone, because the consequences will be substantial.
Yeah.
If you do that you say something in a public school and somebody will admonish you. If you say something in a Christian school, there are ramifications.
Yeah, our Christian school was a little different. I would say that there was a lot more sensitive people to that line. Like there were people anti-Halloween, couldn't celebrate.
Oh, wow.
We didn't celebrate Halloween or anything. And in fact,
Baptist.
when it was Halloween time, they basically spent the whole week bad mouthing Halloween, calling it Satanism and all this kind of stuff. Shout out to the Bible teacher, Mrs. Carpenter. She hated Halloween. A Harry
No
Potter
costume contest?
is a time. So Harry Potter came out.
Oh man, they hated Harry Potter. They hated Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Could not talk about Harry
It's
Potter.
it's so depressing.
It is. This was way worse because I understand what you're saying, because when I moved up to Columbia Academy had some degenerates that, degenerates in quotation marks, compared to what I experienced over there. And, but this place was like, if someone said, okay, so I got a good story. So my mom substitute taught when I moved to this Christian school, and she brought in Mrs. Doubtfire, and they say damn and Mrs. Doubtfire, and that caused a big shitstorm at the school. That one damn had terrible repercussions that reverberated throughout the parents and the kids.
Not the cross-dressing, not the divorce, but the word damn. Okay.
Back then, nobody thought about cross-dressing in the way that everybody thinks about it now.
No, I know.
Isn't that weird? It's kind of like nobody really thought about Mrs. Doubtfire, and some of the things that you got away with in the late 90s, early 2000s is like
he was grooming his own kids. He was grooming his own kids. That's what Robin Williams was doing.
Yeah. So they were a little different than your usual Christian school bad boys and bad girls, I guess you would say.
Enough religion in schools. Let's talk about sports media. I'm curious, what from your perspective, why do you think it hit with people? Like, why, like the combination of the personalities, the way you guys were covering it, the authenticity, the cussing, whatever it may be. Why do you think it resonated with Titans fans? And then when did you think it was? So the old two-part question here. Why did it resonate? And then when did you think it was something that you wanted to do more than just as a hobby?
So I would say that it probably resonated because I got two weird answers. Well, I got one good answer and one weird answer. I think the authenticity is the big thing. I think anybody can sniff out fake authenticity, fake relationships on the air, on TV. Like, a lot of people, I think, even in our market, they just don't come off as real people. They come off as like bots or aggregators and stuff. So I think our authenticity is what really sold it. And then, of course, the relationship within that authenticity. We're all kind of different people, but we're all kind of the same people when it comes to our humor and being able to talk about the Tennessee Titans in different viewpoints, different ways, and be able to argue, but not argue for the sake of arguing, which is also another staple of shows. We're arguing because we all believe what we're currently saying. So it's not just forced arguments or anything. But I think the real reason it took off, outside of that, I think is our production value. So shout out to DJ EJ, my brother-in-law, who really got us going on. If you guys are going to do this and I'm going to come be a part of it, we're going to set up the audio and get the equipment that's necessary to have good audio, because everybody else was terrible audio. And that's a big bugaboo of mine. It's like, it's tough for me to listen to anybody if they sound like they're recording from a bathroom stall at some gas station. Like, it is terrible audio just does me. And I think that really helped us take off, because at the time there was probably just 2 Titans podcasts. Now everybody wants a Titans podcast, but there were just 2, and the other 2 had terrible audio, and they were also kind of boring and didn't really know football. And so I think that's kind of where it kind of took off. And I think for me, it was the 2019 draft that was in Nashville, and we did a live show, and it was complete chaos. I mean, it was fun, but we were in the corner pub. We got a sponsor. They let us come do the corner pub. We drank all damn day, drinking throughout the show. We're having fun, doing analysis. We had Jalen Brown, Teron Davenport, Luke Worsham, Will Compton came on, and that's when he used our show to announce Bussin' with the Boys. And that place was packed with people there to watch us talk about football. And I thought it was awesome. And of course, there are a few stragglers, just because of the draft and how it is. But Corner Pub is a block or 2 away from downtown and where everything's happening. And I think that was the moment that it clicked for me, is like, okay, we got something special here. I can dedicate a little bit more time to this show to try and make this worthwhile for everybody involved.
What do you think the difference is now that you've dabbled in sort of radio? What do you think the difference is it takes skill wise to go on to air like that? Because you to your point, you can't ramble unfiltered for 20 minutes. You have to
Yeah.
get in and out of commercials, you have to get in and out of segments. How does it change to be focused on air versus being on a podcast?
So I'm kind of doing this a little bit like analytically, is like, what is a good topic, and specifically for the show that I'm doing with Blaine, and we're doing it again on Friday. Is like, what are good topics that I find interesting that will also get Blaine talking, and because everybody's tuning in for his analysis, so it's like the best version of Frank Wycheck, I thought, whether it was on his stint on 104.5 The Zone or when he was on Titans Radio, was when he was talking the X's and O's. And when you get a player, any player from any sport, I think talking about the X's and O's, but in a way that the question is framed that gets the listener at home thinking and talking and enjoying football or whatever sport it may be, I think that's the best of sports radio. That may not be the most listened to or the most clipped off or anything, but to me, I feel like you can also find ways to organically disagree within those comments that will generate other stuff. I think that a lot of shows focus too much on the personal aspect of the hosts. Like, what are you doing for Father's Day? Or what did you do for Father's Day? And what'd you wear? Like, you could waste a whole segment talking about, Father's Day, Mother's Day, what you did over the weekend. And that to me feels it's a little bit more like a John Boy and Billy in the mornings than it is a sports show. And I think that Robbie and Rexroad do a good job of this. They organically find those personal moments, but they spend the majority of their show talking sports. And I know that their ratings are shooting up as in the mornings and stuff, which is a testament to their work and their chemistry. But I also think that's a testament to what people are tuning out from and tuning in to. And I think that there's always going to be a place for that hot take, and that's something. And I don't call my opinions hot takes because I believe my opinions. They're just like they're disagreeable takes, I guess you would say. Like, but I believe in them, and I'm not just saying it, but I think they do generate some heat, right? So I think you can find those organically in a conversation. And to do that, I have to be very targeted in the questions I ask. Like, if I ask a question to Stoney or Braden or Mike, they can riff on any question. And they can always bring it back to an informative point of view, and kind of meander and explore the space in a podcast. You can kind of, walk around and explore the space, as Braden says, on a certain topic. Here, you have to be more targeted, and it's going to sound weird. Like, okay, so Mickey and Blaine, when they interviewed Coach Mack, I didn't know I was interviewing Coach Mack till like an hour before I left my house on Tuesday. So I went and listened to Coach Mack on Blaine and Mickey, and I counted how many questions each of them asked, because I was like, okay, well, will let me know what I need to how many questions we kind of need to ask Coach Mack, and then how we kind of pass it off, and how many questions I ask, how many questions Blaine asks. And so I kind of look at it, it's nerdy, but I kind of look at it from an analytical approach, is how many questions do I ask per segment to Blaine to make up the whole segment? Like, to make sure that we have enough time, have enough segment, and we get enough viable information from Blaine, on a subject of football, which is really what everybody kind of tunes into this market to talk about, is Tennessee Titans and college football. So, how do I approach that? And for me, one of the bigger transitions is going to be talking about other sports. Talking about college baseball, talking about hockey, maybe a little bit more, soccer a little bit more, which I I'm peripherally around those sports and know enough to be dangerous, but I'm going to have to obviously learn some names and do this kind of stuff and kind of devote a little bit more, take a little bit of my brain power away from football and just kind of split it among those other segment of sports.
What was your favorite part of doing the show?
I think just interacting with the chat and the phone. Like the phone, like it was kind of funny, the guy calls in. We had one caller. We had two callers, we could only get to one. And the guy calls in and he's like, "Hey Blaine, how are you? Thanks for having me on." And we hung up the phone. The first words out of my mouth, I didn't get a greeting. Like, why is this guy's problem? What's David in Nashville's problem that you couldn't say hi to me? I don't get a hi. It's just Blaine. And Joe's like, "Well, you gotta get used to it and stuff." And then of course in the YouTube chat, everybody was like, who is this guy? And so like I opened up the segment and then it's like, for those that may not know who I am, that's a you problem. Like, I can't believe you don't know who I am. What kind of Titans fan are you that you don't know who Zach Lyons is? And so like, just poking fun of people. So like that, because, Blaine's probably not used to that. And then, I brought up, I said, the YouTube chat is really electric, Blaine. I said, we got juice debates. And he goes, juice debates? Why are they talking about juice? And I go, they start talking about John Ojukwu in the chat. And someone said OJ, and that led to a juice debate. What's the most underrated juice and all that kind of stuff. And he just, when I brought up John Ojukwu, and he just looked at me like, why are they talking about John Ojukwu in the chat? It's like, that's just something you have to get used to. These are my people.
Yeah.
These are my people in the chat.
Yeah. Explain the 10 seconds before the light pops on. How's the heart rate?
Oh, it was frantic as shit because we got in there and they were playing basically the music. And I didn't even have my headphones plugged in. Like I felt like they started the show a little bit later compared to what they do on YouTube. And so my laptop wasn't connected to the internet. I couldn't even see if I was positioned correctly. I mean, it was intense. And I had a problem with the headphones going in and out, which doesn't really faze me because I don't really, first off, like hearing myself through the headphones, so I'm okay with that if they don't even work. But
I thought you were going to say I don't like listening to other people.
Well, that too. I have a real hard time with listening to other people as well. And but it was really frantic. But luckily because I wrote down my intro, it wasn't as frantic as it could have been if I just had been going off the cuff. What's funny is I'm leaving, and Brent Doherty's on the radio, and I'm leaving trying to get the gate open. You have to get right up on that gate to get out. I'm out in the rain, kind of moving around. Well, can we get this thing open? And I see Dawn running to the studio, and I'm like, she is late. That girl is late. So man. It wasn't bad as what maybe Dawn was going through, the anxiety that she was having trying to arrive on time.
That's fantastic.
So one of the things you talk about, sort of being real targeted and real direct, and I do agree. Personally, I agree with you that inside the game is the most interesting stuff. Sometimes that's, me, Zach. I really enjoy the psychology of all of sports and competition and pushing yourself and the challenges and adversity. I love the X's and O's stuff, the scheme. I love the data. That's all sort of inside the game. But in broader sports talk radio, sometimes you have to be very careful with going too deep into all of that stuff. And so I find it. I'm curious, since you guys got started, because it's not really that long ago. It's only been, like you said, 6-7 years now. How much smarter do you think the market is? How much smarter do you think Tennessee Titans fans are? We've had Herndon on this show before, and he was a big part of your show, and you guys sort of pulling people into the modern era of coverage. So how much smarter do you think Titans fans are now? I know there's still a lot of old folk listening to radio, and they don't necessarily care about EPA, but I think we're a different market today than we were in even 2015.
Yeah, I would say so. That's probably just because the market is also getting younger at the same time. You got Twitter, social media. Everybody's a little bit more involved, has more access to information as well. I mean, you get people quoting, PFF grades and advanced stats all the time, and everybody's trying to do it. Some of them do it poorly. Some of them just totally ignore the stats that are really readily available to them and get the stats completely wrong. But for the most part, I think people understand a little bit more. You could probably lean into certain things you probably couldn't even 2 years ago talk about on the radio. And I think that's mainly due to, I think, Mike's writing, first and foremost, because Mike was a writer before he was a podcaster. And then I think our podcast and Football and Other F Words, we got really into it. We talked a lot about schemes. We did a couple shows called I'm an Idiot, where we record with Mike and me, and I make these graphics and like explain to me like I'm an idiot the one tech. And then we show up a graphic on all the defensive line fronts and all that kind of stuff, like educating people, but poking fun enough, but educating people and stuff that even at the time we did that I was still learning. And I think that's kind of what made Stacking Inbox a little bit different, and why I wanted to branch out, is because I could write when I wanted. And what I wanted to write about was mainly advanced stats and the numbers and the analytics and educate the fans. But that's also what our goal was, Football and Other F Words. Like, okay, we're having fun. We're having a blast. Sometimes we're drinking. We're cussing a lot. We're poking fun at each other. But at the end of the day, you're walking out with a different perspective of maybe the Titans, but also maybe the football world in general. And I don't think people would be as interested in the analytics hiring, like the analytics department. I don't think if Football and Other F Words existed, nobody would give a shit about it, that Mike Vrabel, whether or not they used analytics. I just don't think anybody would. And I don't think anybody would ever find the path to really care and talk about it. And it's something that
and he's humble too. And he's humble too, Steve.
You don't think that if Football and F Words didn't exist, that the sweeping revolution that has come through all of major sports in the last 10 years would be top of mind for Titans fans.
Well, yes, I do agree with that. I don't think that Titans fans really cared about analytics, and really the Tennessee Titans didn't either. And I'm not saying that we changed that for Tennessee Titans at all, but I do think that the amount of fans that actually care, because I think Mike was a real vocal guy before analytics was a real big thing, was a real vocal guy about, I cannot believe they do not have an analytics department. I can't believe they only have one guy in the analytics department. That's something that Mike has been harping on since we probably started the show. So I think that I would credit really Mike's, but it's really Mike using our platform to talk about it. But I don't think Titans fans, like today, they just hired 2 people for the analytics department, right? I don't think Titans fans would have cared if they hired 2 analytics department 4 years ago. And I think that Football and Other F Words made Titans fans care, at least on Twitter, care more about analytics.
I think you guys did it the best. I think that is the way you should phrase it, because we put data analytics into Athlon Sports in like 2015, and the running joke with me at 1025 was that I was not allowed to talk about yards per play in like 2016, because that's all I cared about was like college football analytics. I think you guys did it the best, you and Mike and your crew. I think somebody would have come along, but I do think you guys did it the best. And ultimately, we are all better off as a fan base and as a market because we are understanding all of this stuff more. You mentioned Stacking the Inbox. What have you learned about content and about what people like and about what people don't like through running that Are you at about a year now? Are you over a year with that? I think
I'm over a year.
Over a year. That's what I thought.
I started January of 2023.
So what have you learned through that process that that works versus with Titans fans?
I would say the stuff that we've gotten the most subscriptions off of, paid subscriptions off of, has been, I mean, talking about the players that people really want to talk about. Like, people really just want to talk about the quarterback, right? I mean, really, what it really boils down to is that the people just want, tell me that my quarterback is going to be good. Tell me that my player is going to be good. Now, I serve a different niche on there for the most part, is like, they want the truth, whether it's good or bad. And I try to leave opinions out of it. When I talk about the data, I say what the data tells me, but here's the data for you to come up with your own information. And feel free to use this data out in the world to argue a point. I don't care. So I think for me, what works best is that I'm accessible, because I try to do a couple of AMAs, through the Substack app. I respond quickly to emails that I may get. I I try to listen to what they want as well. And they really just come. What I found about this, kind of like Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And those that are coming for Stacking the Inbox are coming for me. They're coming for Stoney and what we are known for. So it's not like I am basing my content off certain algorithms or anything. I'm basing it off of, here's what I want to write about, and here's what I can write about for 3,000 words, and really, or talk, sometimes I do videos, but this will really be something different that they don't get anywhere else. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to be, is I want to be someone that is unique to the market in multiple ways. I may have shades of other writers' influences or other radio personalities. I may remind you of other radio personalities or podcast personalities. But at the end of the day, I think my brand is, I'm authentically unique in the sense that I can talk about data, but I can also switch it off and talk about, stupid topics like, if the Titans needed a win streak, what fast food mascot should be the 12th Titan? Because Grimace is, it's hot Grimace summer right now.
We lost last night, so it's over.
No, that was fine. Because I was totally going to ask Blaine this question tomorrow, or on Friday.
We lost.
For to instigate, just so I could say hot Grimace summer on the radio.
Yeah. I mean, he had his time, he had his moment, but the Mets lost. So
yeah, that's tough.
Well, so it's interesting. It's interesting because I've heard that a lot from folks who start Substacks and start their own sort of communities, is that the thing that matters most is to do what you think is interesting, to do what you find. And it's somewhat personality based, somewhat sort of internally based, right? But you even just got done saying that's sort of the opposite of what you appreciate on a sports talk show. So really, if you're doing radio or a podcast, you really, and maybe a podcast is in the middle somewhere, but it sounds like it's almost the opposite. If you're going to write for a community and build a relationship, it has to be just what you want to do and what you like, versus where the radio, and this is how I've been taught, it's never about what you want to talk about. It's what your audience wants to hear.
Yeah. So as far as the writing goes, I think it was Aaron Sorkin that it was an interview. It may have been him or Quentin Tarantino, but both guys I really appreciate, the movies that they make, because they make movies that they love. They make shows that they love. And one of those guys said, if you want to be a successful screenwriter, start with writing a movie or a show that you would want to see. And so for Stacking the Inbox, it's all about, okay, here's what I would want to read. Here's the research I'm willing to put in because I'm interested in I don't know what the data is going to tell me. I go in without any preconceived notions because I also want to learn while I'm gathering the data for the thing. For the radio, it was taking that and twisting it. So instead of talking about what does a contract for Will Levis look like in 2026 or 2025 after the 2025 season, here's what the data shows. It's more like asking the fans, asking the listeners, asking the fans, asking Blaine, in your mind, what does Will Levis have to do to earn that $50 million a year contract? And that was a good jumping off point for us to talk about. Can you really find out what Will Levis is this year? Can you know certain things behind the scenes? That also jumped us off. So it's like taking a question that I would normally write and look at all the quarterbacks that, got paid these last 3 years. What's the trends? And here's the data, and turning that into a more digestible topic, like you said, but it also sounds very radio friendly, even though it comes from a background of analytics, like of in my mind. So like, it's more consumer friendly in that essentially I'm asking for input, and people are going to give you like, well, he's got to win games, or it doesn't really matter as long as he's good on the field and stuff like that. And that's fine. That's people's opinions. But the stuff you get from Blaine, and then, the stuff we got from Coach Mack when we asked him that same question, then we followed it up. Can you figure out what he is after year 2? And they both emphatically said yes. And something that we'll talk about, spoiler alert, whenever this is released on podcast, but something we're going to talk about at 1:00 on Friday is, when did Blaine know, and when did the guys in the locker room know that Steve McNair was the guy? And because I think that's an interesting topic that we haven't talked about is like, when do the players know that the guy, because that's the same time that the team and the staff usually probably finds out too. And so when did he know that Steve McNair was the guy? Because that ties into Will Levis, the year 2 discussion. And then it also gives Blaine runway for what people really like is not only Blaine's X's and O's, but Blaine's history. Because everybody loves Steve McNair, everybody loves Eddie George, everybody loves that Titans. And so like it's finding those topics that I do still find interesting and turning them into radio and hoping that it turns into compelling radio. And that's something that is I want to do. Like, I'm not there. If I were to get the job, I'm not there to be Mickey. I'm not there to be Will Bowling. I'm not there to be Brent Doherty. I'm there to be Zach Lyons in my mind. And Zach Lyons hosting a show is going to be different than all 3 of those guys. It's going to be different than Robbie. It's going to be different than Stillman. It's going to be different. But I also understand that it's got to be different and good enough for ratings, because you got to get those ratings, right? So it's all about figuring out how I can stay true to myself while also being on the radio. And I think it's just reframing the questions that I would normally ask to myself when I'm coming up with a topic for Stacking the Inbox.
Well, if you get the gig, you're going to have to stop mentioning personalities on other stations.
Yeah, that's true. I will.
I don't know.
You could do it. It would break the trend, but
both stations are too sensitive about that. That's both
Yeah.
stations. I will say though, what you're going to have to stop doing though is the more mainstream you get, you can't keep talking shit about mainstream media anymore. You're gonna have to stop. You're gonna have to stop that. Because
you'll officially be the mainstream media.
Yeah, I'm breaking the system from within. So I'm infiltrating the ranks to change the entirety of the culture of local media. The other thing I will have to change, and this is something I'm going to ask, in pre-show, how do you get around on radio? Because you can technically say player sucks, or stinks. He stinks. You can say it, but I think that also is a little bit of alienating your listener as well at certain points. So what words can I use to describe, okay, so look at it this way. On our show, Braden, I could get away with calling Nico, I'm a loser, on the show. Can't say that on radio. So how I got to figure out what words or phrasing I can use. I also don't, Blaine, may get offended as well. He's a former player. So, and the players probably listen. And I'm assuming the Titans definitely listen to that way over.
It is the flagship station of the team. Yeah. They are listening.
So I asked Coach Mack a question, and it was like, what position? Because it was a great offseason. The vibes are high. What position?
He didn't give you an answer.
Do you think that they did not address appropriately and will come back to haunt them in the regular season? And he totally did not answer the question. And then I kind of realized in the moment when he was not answering the question, that's kind of asking someone, who do you think inside your boss's building didn't do their job right? And I'm like, okay, so I should have asked my other question on that. So that's something that, I kind of have to learn, is that I'm not really going to get anything negative out of the team, out of Coach Mack in a direct way. I kind of have to ask a sneaky question that maybe gets him talking about maybe some negative things. And that's something I'm going to have to learn, is I can't just go around saying, well, Jack Gibby sucks. I can't believe that they have him on the roster. I have to figure out, couldn't they have found better players than Jack Gibby out there or something like that? I don't know. That's going to be, I think, my biggest hurdle, is not the cussing. It's the saying that a player A stinks when I think player A stinks.
Well, I think, and you didn't ask for this advice, but it is, I think, most important for anybody young who's listening and wants to get into this business. When I was working for the Preds flagship radio station, I had a conversation with the SID for the Preds, the information director. And the first time I met him, and I said, look, if somebody plays terrible or makes a big mistake on the power play, I have to say it on the air, but it's never personal. That's the key. And when you say things like, Nico, I'm a loser, because that's your personality, is to be fun and kind of cheeky. you can be critical and you can say someone didn't do their job. You can say that wasn't good enough, or if you want to win, you've got to be better at this. You can say a lot of things. You just can't make it personal. You can't make it about who they are as a person. And as long as you're talking about performance, I think players, coaches, program directors, general managers, I think everybody understands everybody's got a job to do. But if you make it personal, that's where it kind of comes off and it crosses the line. And so that's always been my, like, sort of the way I operate is like, it's not personal. I'm not insulting who you are. You just didn't do your job on that play. And, that's probably what they're hearing from the coach at the same time. So I think that's how it is. All right. Hey, look, are you having fun?
Yeah, I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
Living my best life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us some time. Of course, do appreciate it. We went a little long here, so I apologize to everybody. But thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you guys for listening. And Zach, congratulations on the journey, man. You've been on quite a ride here, and I appreciate you hanging out with us. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.